Mr Chair, I rise to speak to Part 3, Subpart 1 and 2, which allows lines companies to retail in their local areas. And if this section was considered in and of itself, I can see that there are a number of elements that would be very attractive to lines companies. And in fact, I expect that many lines companies will welcome the opportunity to retail in their particular area. Can I comment briefly on what that landscape might look like, because the primary motivation obviously for lines companies who do get into this will be to deliver a benefit back to their shareholder, often many of whom are electricity users. And some will see actually quite a strong motivation to get involved and ensure that the benefits not only go back to their shareholder, but it strengthens the infrastructure within their local areas. My colleague who spoke previous to me, Damien O'Connor, made the point that this could well be a benefit and opportunity in rural communities. I expect it could be, but it won't be through increased competition in some of those areas. It will be because there is a strengthening of the role of lines companies. In Hamilton, for example, I'm sure the same could be said. Well, Energy Networks will relish the opportunity to retail in that area. More significantly, I can see that they will invest back into infrastructure, because lines companies are critical to ensuring that local infrastructure is invested in, is strengthened to be able to deliver electricity to the household. In fact, again, they could actually be the critical part in ensuring that hospitals have improved infrastructure in their areas as well. So if this part was considered in and of itself, I can see a lot of benefits and opportunities that could be delivered to the consumer who are also shareholders of particular lines companies. However, and this goes to the substantial debate, there is nothing in this bill that deals with the issue of fairness to consumers, and that is an issue that we've raised consistently through the debate in the House, Mr Chair, that we believe the government should recognise, because overall there is a huge differential between domestic and industrial tariffs. There is a huge differential in terms of the increases on domestic households, and we know that there is pressure already on their household prices, and the bill overall does not address that. And simply we would like the Minister to respond in terms of showing how the bill will address these types of differentials, ensure fairness exists in the market, and explain in some detail actually how competition will deliver a benefit back to your domestic consumer, because it is at the nub of really what this type of bill will be tested on, whether or not it will deliver those types of benefits. As I say, I think overall there can be a lot to gain from increased retail competition, but we shouldn't see this as the answer, because it exists within a wider matrix of changes that the government is introducing that does not address the issue of environmental sustainability of electricity generation, does not address the issue of fairness to consumers and pricing of electricity, and it doesn't give any sense about whether or not the government will take leadership in tackling the huge differentials between domestic users and industrial users, and we think that becomes a litmus test for reform in the electricity sector. More importantly, in terms of going forward, again, the government has not signalled, neither in the draft energy strategy or the energy conservation strategy, what it will do to continue to show leadership on investing in renewables. And that is a major challenge that we put to the government to ensure that we're going to have a future that is actually relying more on renewable energy rather than on thermal generation. Also in the area of security of supply, I think it is notable in this part of the debate to note that the government has increased the effort around investing in the lines, the upgrade of the grid through Transpower, and I definitely applaud that. I think that's long overdue. and is something that should be done. Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
But in coming back to Part 3 of the bill, as I say, this particular part cannot be considered in isolation of the whole, and overall the bill will be tested on those areas that I described previously. It will afford opportunities to particular lines companies, and I don't doubt that. I think those lines companies can see the advantages in playing a strengthened role in the retail sector that will deliver some gains to their shareholder who also can be consumers. It will also, I think, reinvest back into the network, the lines network and infrastructure, but then lines companies have been doing that. I think that my colleague Claire Curran raises a very important point about looking at or ensuring that lines companies are a part of the broader rollout of broadband, but with that brings its own difficulties. And we don't want to get to a situation where when you're looking for an integrated seamless rollout of broadband, you've got no strategic overview of how that will work out in very practical terms across different lines companies, and especially when we're talking about the rollout of rural broadband. There are resource management issues that need to be addressed, I suppose, and there will also be some more technical aspects of that particular task to consider. However, notwithstanding those issues that I've raised, there have been a number of challenges and pertinent questions that have been raised by members of the Labour team to the Minister. Now, while the Minister in the seat may not be able to respond, I hope that the questions are being noted so that when the responsible Minister does find fit to respond to those questions, that he is able to do so, because we believe at the end of the day, the litmus test for this particular bill, in terms of the structural reform that they're proposing and the re-governance solutions that they're proposing, that it will deliver cost benefits to domestic consumers, it will lessen the differentials between those consumers and industrial consumers, that it will ensure predictability of pricing over the long term, and I hope, and I sincerely believe, Mr Chair, that the government will actually continue or think about showing leadership in terms of the sustainability of electricity generation in our country, because that is sadly missing. Fairness is sadly missing in this particular bill, and it needs to be addressed if the government is serious about the issues that matter to New Zealanders, and it's what's hurting them in the pockets that will really be the real test. And electricity prices are far too high, and it cannot continue.
Cool.